Joined now by our next guest, Labour's Shadow Housing Minister, Sarah Jones. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, I'm keen to talk about housing, big issue for many people, but I just want to start with a story that we've really been focusing on at Sky News over the coming days. It's about a 19-year-old, Harry Dunn, killed in a road traffic accident, and the suspect is somebody who is the wife of a diplomat. She's returned to the US claiming diplomatic immunity. What do you think the government needs to do now?
Well, I've heard the interview with Harry's family, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, of course, we want the Foreign Secretary to be having the conversations to try and get some justice into this. It's hard enough that you lose a loved one so young, but you have to know that there's going to be some kind of justice done in terms of what happened and holding those people to account. So I think it's right that the Foreign Secretary should have those conversations with the Americans to try and see if we can resolve the situation. And well done to you for raising it, because it's really important.
Is it something that you'd quite like to see Labour pick up and put some pressure on with as well?
I think everybody will look at the family and go, goodness, this is unfair, and we need to see some conversations take place and some pressure put on to try and get justice done. Yeah.
OK, thank you. Now, let's talk about housing, shall we? Because there were some quite radical policies that were discussed in relation to housing at Labour's conference. I'm keen to get your view on, to try and work out what the next steps are when it comes to what Labour is trying to achieve. So one of them was to requisition by compulsory purchase order empty private homes. I mean, is that effectively the state seizing private property? What is that?
So we've got a whole package of proposals that the Labour Party have put forward, and at conference, our conference members kind of pushed us to go further on a whole range of issues. The underlying problem we have here is a housing crisis of quite huge proportions, which is kind of in many different layers. You have the problem with homelessness. We've had 700 deaths in a year of people on our streets dying because they don't have a home, and all those families in bed and breakfast. But we also have, you know, a Conservative Party where home ownership has gone down, where you have nearly 1 million under 45s who are unable now to buy their home, who would have been. You have really unfit private rented accommodation. You have all the impact of of Grenfell and what's happened since, in terms of an understanding now that our building controls are so weak that we have thousands of people living in unfit homes, and we have climate change. So all of those things are what our members looked at, and one of those points was, what do we do about homes that are empty, which is a completely reasonable question, because we've all seen those blocks, you know, perhaps ones where people buy flats to as an investment and nobody's actually living in them, and we want to make sure we look at that compulsory purchase power. And I think the Conservatives, I've you know, spoken to many backbenchers in the Conservative Party as well who want to look at these powers. So what do we do? You
are comfortable then with the idea of going into a property that has been empty and effectively the state taking it?
Well, what we've said so far in our policies that we've announced is that we'd put an increase in council tax on those homes that are empty, so that if you're
But we're talking about compulsory purchase order.
Yeah, and that was what was in the conference motion, and that's the kinds of issues that we're looking at. Like,
so you're considering
We're looking at a whole range of issues around what do we do with empty homes. There are hundreds of thousands of empty homes, but the bigger problem is that this government is building fewer social homes than ever since the war. We need to be building council homes. We need to be helping people who want to own their own home get into home ownership. We've seen very peculiar announcements from the Secretary of State in terms of right to buy, of shared ownership of housing associations, which the housing sector have said is a completely bum deal and won't work. And we've seen nothing on the scale that will actually begin to address the housing problem that we face in this country.
I think we can all agree on some of the issues, but it's the solutions that are the difficult bit, right? And talking about right to buy, I mean, John McDonnell gave an interview recently, the Shadow Chancellor, talking about giving tenants the right to buy their rented homes at a knockdown price. Is that something that Labour is considering?
So he's looking at this. He's been interested in it for a while. Again, there are Conservative think tanks that have been putting out reports on how that might work for a long time. We want more people who want to buy to be able to. We have a product that we've already announced called First Buy, which would give you a discount on your home, so that can get more people into home ownership, but the discount stays with the property, not with the person, so it's fairer than other systems. We've said we want to suspend right to buy in council homes, because what's happened is homes haven't been rebuilt.
But what about giving tenants the right to buy their house at a knockdown price?
So that's something that we haven't announced as policy. It's something that that John McDonnell's looking at, that John Healey, Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, is looking at. It's something that's being debated across the political divide. Is there some kind of first dibs if a house is for sale that could go to the tenant? Is there some kind of tax break that would incentivise the landlord or the tenant to be able to buy?
I guess my question is, who decides what is a knockdown price? Because there'll be some people who, you know, have a house that they want to let out for whatever reason it is. Maybe they need to move away for work, and they're going to be worried that somebody else, as in the state, will decide how much they need to sell their house for and effectively force
I don't
them to
think
do
we're
it.
talking about anything like that. I think what we're looking at in private renting at the moment is you've now got 1 in 4 families living in private rented accommodation. The biggest problem for them is the lack of security, because we have this clause where you can be evicted for any reason. The second problem is the huge costs of housing, which are pushing many people into poverty in this country. You know, hundreds of thousands of children living in private rented accommodation, that because of the cost of it, that family, those children are in poverty. And you've got really poor standards in the private rented sector with no control over what happens. So there's a whole array of things we need to be doing.
Now, I'm keen to ask about Brexit, of course. It feels like we can't get away with it, not asking in any of our interviews. I just want to have a quick look at something that you said on Question Time this week. You said, on Brexit, Labour's position is not a soundbite. It's not easy to explain. It has its difficulties. The point is, it's honest. Is that the agreed party line, that your Brexit policy isn't easy to explain and that it has its difficulties?
What I was saying is, the get Brexit done, Conservative, let's break the law if we have to, you know, extraordinary position.
Although they are saying that they will obey the law, to be fair.
How do you do that and also not ask for an extension? The law of the land is that if he doesn't get a deal, the Prime Minister has to ask for an extension. How can he not do that?
So Labour's position,
breaking the law. So that is the most extraordinary thing, that here we are talking about what do we do if a man who was sacked twice for lying, whose own sister thinks he's in bed with hedge funds, whose only friend in the cabinet, Amber Rudd, had to resign because she didn't believe he was actually serious about it.
So Labour's position, why do you have so many difficulties?
So we have the Conservative view, which is out we go, whatever happens. We have the Lib Dem view, which is let's forget it ever happened. You know, we never had this referendum where the people actually made a decision, so let's forget it all. Labour's position is really clear. We have to put it back to the people. What I was saying is that it's honest, and it's the only compromise position between these two extremes, where everybody's getting very angry and fighting each other over these two extreme views.
How can it be clear but also not easy to explain?
Because it's not get Brexit done. It's not a kind of soundbite that's being thrown at us every second of every day, but it's the right position. We want to say, look, the people voted to leave in 2016. They didn't say how we leave, and there are a million different ways to do that. The Prime Minister's deal will jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement, one of the most important things that we have that holds our nation together. The Prime Minister's deal will get rid of all our standards, so we can have the chlorinated chicken of America that we're so keen to avoid. Our view is we need to put it back to the people to say, here are two positions that are reasonable. One is a deal that actually keeps us close so we don't threaten jobs, and one is that we remain. And that is the right, honest view that I think actually, at the end of the day, will be what we do going forward.